Excuse me. Alright, hello and welcome to another episode of 99% Geek Presents Season 0, a book reading of A Suburban Fantasy. This is Season 0 of the Urban Fantasy series, or no, this is Season 1 of the Urban Fantasy series, Season 0 of 99% Geek. Previously on A Suburban Fantasy, Rachel Lin Smith was a shy teenage girl until she was turned into a vampire against her will by an evil serial-killing monster named Eckhart Ghens. She managed to escape from his evil clutches and return to her friends who helped her acclimate herself with her new life, or with her old life, her old normal human life, going back to school and living with her parents. But Eckhart Ghens was able to find her despite hiding in the small suburb of Oakville, and he terrorized her in her school until her teacher managed to scare him away. The whole time that was happening, however, there was a strange buzzing going on, and her mother uncovered a plot by the mayor that may be behind everything. What that plot could be, we don't know yet, but a swarm of bees has suddenly descended upon the town of Oakville, and it's scary. So here comes chapter 12, and it's entitled, Alright, here's what we're going to do. And it begins, everything's in italics, because it is a written letter that is being read. So we're going to read it alongside whoever the narrator of this scene is. It's Hannah. The narrator of the scene is Hannah. April 24th, 1904. I have been privy to many breakthroughs in science, but never have I seen a person twist nature's forces with such perversion. I despise my part in it, and myself by correlation. I dare not look anyone in the eye, even as I explain the events that led to my laboratory's destruction in West Orange, and the loss of power that was felt throughout New Jersey and most of Manhattan. No one could see my horror, or else attract more attention than Joseph deserved. Maybe it was best that our little secret remained buried in the wreckage. I was not the only man involved on the project, but I dare not say any of their names, else risk implicating them in this catastrophe. I speak not of them, for they are not to blame. That twisted beast lies solely in the young Joseph Dixon, and I use his name freely, knowing that he has gone now far beyond anyone's reach. Excuse me. I just drank a whole lot of Coke, and it was delicious. When he had first come to us, I had thought, like everyone else, that he was mad. The things he was proposing were taken straight out of H.G. Wells' science fiction. But when he showed us the science, it all suddenly seemed to be attainable. He just couldn't do it alone. Joseph was a brilliant theoretical scientist, but a horrible engineer. He needed someone especially knowledgeable with the workings of electrical systems. Who better than the inventor of the light bulb? So I helped him build his machine. It started in a small wing of my lab, but our ambitions quickly grew to engulf my entire facility. I was a fool, foolish to believe all of Joseph's fantasies, not because he was wrong, but because he ended up being right. And it's not like the signs of his madness were well hidden. He often spoke of his fear of death, and his predictions of a future without such petty things, where humanity would master immortality and answer all the questions of the universe. He hungered to get there. He was a man obsessed. Even as everything fell apart around us, he could not be talked out of continuing the experiment, even after the bees. By all accounts, it never should have worked, and yet, the last thing I remember is seeing him step into the bubble and smile out at me with a look of triumph mixed with fear. And then The building came down on us along with the swarm. Either Joseph died and is still buried there under all that rubble, or else he's in a whole other world beyond my very comprehension." Ripped from the pages from Thomas Edison's Lost Journal. Hannah dropped the aged piece of paper, and it floated slowly to Kieran's floor. Hannah had been invited upstairs by the paranoid woman with ebony skin, and shown to the woman's apartment where she had walls covered in pictures and post-it notes. She'd pulled one particular old parchment off the wall and handed it to Hannah. Where the hell did you find this?" Hannah asked Kieran, after reading it. "Tore it out myself," the woman responded, folding her arms. Hannah couldn't believe what Kieran seemed to be trying to tell her. She knew Joseph was capable of a lot. She could sense it the moment they first met. But time travel? "How do we even know this is the same Joseph Dixon?" Hannah asked. Kieran shot her an angry look. "Why do you think they've been after me this whole time?" she asked rhetorically, some of her exhaustion and paranoia shining through her otherwise picture-perfect poker face. But what she was saying didn't make sense. "Who's after you?" Hannah told Kieran. "You were fired, that was it." "You're wrong," Kieran said, turning on the TV. "I only got away from them by going incognito." "As who?" Hannah asked, eyeing the woman's long red pigtails. "Pippi Longstocking?" Kieran ignored her comment, her attention rooted to the screen. "You remember the bees Edison mentioned in his journal?" she asked. Hannah tried to see what had caught the woman's eye and saw it was a view from the sky of a large swarm of bees. The largest Hannah had ever seen. So they'd finally figured out where all the bees went. Then she started to recognize the surrounding landmarks. Is that Oakville?" she asked with horror. No answer was needed. Hannah already knew it was. "Nah," Kieran said, jabbing her finger at the screen. "That's Joseph Dixon." Hannah's kids were in that. Her husband. She approached the TV slowly, her mind freezing in abject terror. "Do you know how we can stop them?" she asked Kieran. It was down to them to save her family and her town, and she would do it with or without this woman's help. We can't stop him without driving into that swarm," Kieran told her, pointing to the horrible sight on the TV. They were replaying the same footage over and over again, showing one of their news anchors reporting on location for a different story when she is suddenly, and quite to her surprise, overtaken by bees. She falls, startled and screaming, into the mast just before the camera goes to static and the clip is restarted. "You'd have to be crazy to do that," Kieran continued, and Hannah knew that, though still paranoid, the woman was right. Scene change. Scene change. Scene change. Rachel found the child. It wasn't hard. Even without her sight, she followed the screams to a baby stroller. It was covered in bees, but so was everything and every one. She'd already led the mother to the shelter of the school. Grabbing the baby, she held it against her so that no more bees could get to the boy. It was still crying, but Rachel tried to ignore it, closing her eyes and slipping back through the storm to where the mother waited. It was hard focusing on her powers with all the noise. The bees were so loud it was deafening, almost as deafening as her hunger, but she couldn't think of that now. Counting her blessings, Rachel had to admit that for the most part the bees were ignoring her. She'd been stung a few times, to be sure, but the others she'd passed were being overwhelmed. Bees, Rachel supposed, were smart to stay away from vampires, especially hungry ones. "Oh, thank you," the woman said as Rachel came through the front door and passed the woman her baby. The woman was crying almost as heavily as her baby, more so as the boy quieted upon sighting his mother. "Here, take this," the mother tried insisting, fumbling for cash from her purse. Rachel hadn't saved the boy for reward. If she hadn't have acted, the baby would have died, and she'd do it again in an instant. "Pay it forward," she told the woman. "Oh, God!" the vampire heard a teen girl yell from out on the street. "Somebody help me, please!"
Rachel went back into the dark of the swarm, slipping through thousands of bees until she got to the girl, who screamed, crying and writhing in agony over her boyfriend, who was himself spasming on the concrete. The girl grabbed at Rachel's shirt, pulling on her in a panic. "He's allergic to bees!" she screamed loudly at Rachel over the roar. The vampire couldn't slip away with both of them. She still hadn't fed and was starting to feel tired. Her powers were a drain on her, and she knew she needed blood, but she didn't have time to feed, not while the kid died on the street. Rachel lifted the boy easily, carrying him in her arms. "Hold on to me," Rachel told the girl, who grabbed her sleeve. She could smell the nearest house was just across the street. She could lead them there and find help. He was foaming at the mouth and squirmed against her grasp. There was no way he was going to make it, and yet Rachel couldn't give up on him. She moved fast, but not too fast that the girl behind her wouldn't be able to keep up. It took 10 agonizing seconds to get to the door, and she kicked it open, uninterested in whomever might live there. The teen's life was more important than breaking and entering. The girl closed the door behind them. The two kids were both ninth graders from the looks of them, but Rachel didn't recognize either one. "Does he have one of those pens?" Rachel asked the girl. She'd placed the boy on the carpet, but he was still writhing and gasping for breath. Drool dripped down his cheeks, and his eyes were rolling into the back of his head. The girl shook her head. "He had a reaction to chocolate 2 days ago, and my grandmother's birthday. He ordered another epinephrine shot, but it doesn't come in till Thursday." Her eyes filled with tears. "If he dies because of that stupid piñata, oh God!" She shook her head. "I'd never forgive myself." She muttered quiet enough that Rachel wouldn't hear her, but she did. "All right," Rachel said in a bit of a panic. "So we need an EpiPen in like 5, and that should work?" We need an EpiPen or like 5, and that should work?" The girl shook her head as the tears flowed freely. "I don't know," she said, defeated. "All right," Rachel said again. "Just stay here. I'll be right back." She slipped out into the swarm again, moving at speeds beyond human, to appear at the nurse's office inside her school. "I need an epinephrine shot," she said before even looking around. The nurse, a Russian man with a long black beard, was staring out the window in awe. "Ah," the man said, looking away from the window to eye Rachel. "Anaphylactic shock from a bee sting?" he asked the vampire. "Do not taunt the dog if you do not wish to be bit," he said with a gruff laugh. "Ha ha ha ha." Grabbing the handle on one of his file cabinets, he tried to open it, but the drawer was locked. "I've got the key here someplace," he said, searching his pockets, but Rachel was very impatient. The boy out there didn't have time for Mr. Pankovic to find his keys again. Crossing the length of the room effortlessly, she pulled the drawer free despite the lock and pulled out a number of long syringes. "Are these what I need?" she asked the Russian nurse. "They will work," he told her, his voice surprisingly unsteady. It was only then did Rachel smell what she had never noticed as a human visiting the office. She could smell the alcohol on his breath. He'd likely been drinking from the bottle of vodka on his desk only just before she'd shown up. She supposed she should thank him for sticking to the Russian stereotype, but she didn't have time. Disappearing from beside him, she figured he would simply blame the drink and think nothing else of it. She slipped across the street again and rejoined the two grade 9s. Grade 9ers. I need an R there. Boop. Easiest fix. The boy was still struggling for life, gasping frantically for air he just couldn't find. Rachel had the answer. She stabbed the EpiPen into the writhing boy, and almost immediately he was breathing again. He took a couple deep, loud breaths, rolling to his side and then puking onto the welcome mat beside them. He gulped, overly happy to be alive. Sorry, I was just trying to make somebody else have a vomit attack. My mistake. Don't stop listening. It's okay. I'm not dying. Don't call any 911s. Alright, let's keep going. "You alright?" the brown-haired ninth grader asked, leaning down beside her boyfriend. The boy nodded. I can't even explain to you how horrible going into shock feels." The girl hugged him. "I'm so sorry," she said, sobbing. "Oh, hey now, Millie," he said, seemingly happy to be getting so much attention, and that was before Stranger Things. I also can't describe how amazing epinephrine feels, he told her with a grin. "Uh, You should stay here until the swarm passes." My God, I gave Rachel and the little boy the same voice. Uh, you should stay here until the swarm passes, Rachel told the two as she tried to steel herself to going back out there. After all, there were other people out there who could use her help. She'd have time to feed when it was all over. The girl, Millie, got up and thanked Rachel. "I've seen you around school," she said to Rachel. "Always thought you looked cool, but I was too shy to ever say hi." Rachel supposed no one in her grade ever really put much effort into opening themselves up to the ninth graders, though in her defense she'd had no idea any of them thought she was cool. "Don't sweat it," Rachel said to them, blushing to herself. You're serious?" the boy said. "You saved my life." "I'm so voting for you for student president this year," Millie said. "You don't have to do that." The boy tried to sit up, looking weak. "I owe you," he told her. There's gotta be something we can do." Rachel went to the door. "I don't know," she said. "Add me to Facebook." Scene change. Scene change. Scene change. Ian had never seen anything like it, of course. He doubted anyone in the school with him had any clue what was going on, and still everyone gathered in the halls and talked frantically to one another. Ian pushed through the crowd in a hurry, looking to meet his friends in the computer lab. Andrew had sent everyone a text moments before suggesting they bring the think tank together again. If there ever was a code black situation, Ian supposed it was then, though it had occurred to him that this wasn't the first code black of the day. It had only been minutes since he was helping his best friend battle a brainwashed bully, and now things had gotten so much worse. And it's all my fault, Ian heard another student say loudly. It was enough to turn Ian's head, and he recognized the speaker was none other than his peer, Gordon. "What did you say?" Ian asked the teen, who was rubbing the dark skin of his bald head with worry. "Damn, man," he cussed angrily. "I'm saying I dreamed all this, Fletcher. Bee's been messing with me ever since I shot that nest with my experimental laser." You're... Ian began, thoroughly confused now. "Wait, what?" "I pissed off the bees by killing one of the hives," he tried to explain to Ian, "and now they're here for revenge." "You know that's ridiculous, right?" Ian asked, questioning the foul-mouthed genius. Have you looked outside lately?" Danny McGreed asked from beside Gordon. "It's all Egyptian plagues out there." "Yeah," Gordon said, "and it's my fault." "Your average is like 3 grade points higher than mine," Ian reminded Gordon. "Surely you know there's a more reasonable explanation." He realized then that their think tank might just need the smartest kid in school. "Just follow me," he told Gordon. "We'll figure it out." "Ian!" yelled another familiar voice. At this rate he'd never get to his friends. This time it was his science teacher, Mr. O'Byrne, rushing to join them after hearing Ian talking to Gordon. "I took care of Eckhart," he yelled across the hall at Ian. "Yo, Burns," Gordon said. Ian's jaw dropped. "Like, killed him?" he asked O'Byrne hopefully. No," Mr. O'Byrne admitted. But he shouldn't bother you guys again." Ian knew better than to assume that was the case, but they had bigger issues. We're meeting in the computer lab to try and figure out what our next move should be," he told the teacher. "Can I come?" O'Byrne asked, seeming intent to make himself useful to them. Ian shook his head and said, "No adults allowed." O'Byrne looked like he'd been slapped in the face, and Ian chuckled. "I'm just kidding." Oh, I should have been like, "I'm just kidding." He, for one, would feel safer with O'Byrne around, especially if the teacher had really gone toe to toe with Eckhart and lived. As they approached the computer lab, they could already hear Andrew's voice yell out over the horrific noise of the outside swarm that engulfed the whole school. "This site says that if all the bees in the world disappeared, humans would follow in 4 years." They came in as Jason leaned back in his chair and glanced out the window. We really have Nothing to worry about then, he pointed out. That quote about bees is bullshit, Gordon told Andrew. Like the other joke about us using only 10% of our brains. Some retard made a bold statement with an incomplete... Again, this was like 10 years ago. Just for the record. Just for the record. Made a bold statement with an incomplete understanding of his own damn subject matter. One thing very few people consider, 99.9% of all species that have lived on the earth are already extinct. Stupid. Don't use that word, O'Byrne told Gordon. Which one? Gordon asked. What the hell is he doing here? Andrew asked, turning in his chair. Seeing Mr. O'Byrne, he added, They're not in the gang. Neither is she, Ian said, motioning to Alice. The red-haired girl opened her mouth in protest, but Bilal placed a finger... Neither is she, Ian said, motioning to Alice. The red-haired girl opened her mouth in protest, but Bilal placed a finger on her lips. Aha, don't waste your breath, Bilal told her unnecessarily. He doesn't listen when he's in these kinds of moods. Ian ignored him, but Alice didn't. She shot him a look that would break a mirror and grabbed his finger from her lip, twisting it violently. Ah! Bilal screamed as he fell to his knees. So wait, Mike said, and he had noticed him for the first time behind a row of computers. If we use more than just 10% of our brains, does that mean the movie Limitless was completely fake? 'Cause I've been looking for one of those pills that make you smart. It's called Ritalin, Gordon said with a shrug. Amazing what an ordinary dude like you or me can do with even just a little bit of focus, without all the damn distractions of the world. If you ignore all the side effects, Mr. O'Byrne said, crossing his arms, can we put a little focus back on our bee problem? All right, new rule, Mike said to O'Byrne as Ian took a seat beside Jason. If you want to hang with the cool kids, you're not a teacher anymore, just one of the guys. He crossed his arms, so no talking like a teacher. O'Byrne raised his hands in surrender. I've been running searches since I got here, Andrew told them over his 3 monitors. A lot of people don't realize that the Earth has been around for a long time, and that things that happen usually have happened before, and if it's happened before, you can always find it on Google. His eyes darted from one monitor to the other before continuing. Only I was unable to find anything quite to the scale, he admitted to them. Not surprising, Ian said, but Andrew stopped him, except for one reported swarm over New Jersey in 1908. Andrew smiled as everyone was suddenly interested in what he had to say. I'm emailing you a couple of links, he told Jason. Jason pulled up the article he was sent, and Ian leaned in to read it. Whoa, Jason said as he scrolled down. Two days later, and one scientist is still missing. A Dr. Joseph Dixon. And look at this. He showed Ian the picture of the scientist. Look familiar to you? He asked. Ian studied the black and white picture of the scientist. No, he admitted. A young Alec Baldwin? Jason frowned. Of course not, he mumbled. No one bothers to pay attention to politics anymore. He pointed to the screen. This guy looks exactly like our mayor. Mayor Dixon? Andrew asked from across the room as he typed furiously into his keyboard. He must have found what he wanted because he stopped. No way, he said in surprise as he studied the picture on the screen. They look the same and have the same name. He tilted his head to the side as if it would give him a better view. I know this one, Mike said, joining Ian and Mr. O'Byrne at Jason's computer. He had his hood up over his baseball cap as if the combination of the two would protect him from the swarm if they got inside. He's a vampire. Bilal left Alice's side to join them at the computer and saw the picture for himself. Aha! Well, then you didn't get turned into a vampire for another 30 years. Jason pulled a new window and started a search. When you run for any political office, all your private documents become public, Jason told them. Like his Canadian citizenship, he applied in 1978, and he was 25. Jason laughed, and here's a picture. He pulled up a picture, likely from the mayor's passport, showing a young man with much shorter hair than in his 1908 picture. Other than that, though, they were easily the same person. The article from 1908 says he was 24 when he went missing, Andrew told them. Man, I'm tripping shit, Gordon told the gang. You guys can't be thinking what I'm thinking, 'cause I'm losing my mind. Time travel, Mr. O'Byrne said, quietly at first, with little confidence. When no one said anything for a moment, he added loudly, It has to be. He's a time traveler from the past? Andrew asked. I don't get it. Are they invading? Do they seek to kill us all with their muskets? They didn't use muskets in 1908, Jason corrected sharply. This is crazy, Gordon said angrily, stepping away. You guys are all mad. First vampires, then time travel? Mr. O'Byrne shrugged. You once told me you thought time travel was possible, he reminded Gordon. I meant theoretically, Gordon told their teacher, not literally, Holmes. But I don't get it, Andrew said, scratching his chin. The beasts show up when he travels through time? He asked. Does that mean the guy is traveling again? Is he going back to his time to tell his people of our superior weaponry? I don't believe it's possible to go back in time, Mr. O'Byrne said. If my theory is right, traveling forward in time is more than simple if we do it every day, every minute, every second. But if time is a dimension, Gordon argued, then what's stopping us from traversing it any which way we please? He then quickly added, theoretically. I don't believe time is a dimension, Mr. O'Byrne told them, going to the whiteboard and writing the word time before erasing it. I believe we invented time as a tool, a unit of measure to help us plan our days and lives and live our lives. But to the universe, our time means nothing. To the universe, change just happens. There's just forward motion. To go back in time would mean to reverse all the changes in the universe, he continued. The teacher grabbed a glass from Mr. Martin's desk and dropped it on the floor. The noise it made upon touchdown cracked like a whip over the whole classroom, making everyone jump. It's easy to drop a glass and shatter it, he told them, but it would be much harder to put those pieces back together again and return it to my hand. Once things reach a state of entropy and lose their potential to do or be anything, there's no going back. Ian was trying to keep up, but he had to admit he wasn't the greatest scientist. So, our mayor wants to travel more forward in time? He asked with disbelief. Yeah, Gordon agreed, crossing his arms. Why would he even stop in 77? Hello, Andrew said as if it was obvious. Star Wars? Jason was reading through the article again. Says there was a blackout at the exact same time, he told them. O'Byrne nodded. What if he couldn't find enough energy before to go as far as he wanted, and now he's trying again? Mike raised a hand and everyone looked at him. We're not in class, Ian told Mike. You can just talk. Oh, right, Mike said, lowering his hand. He threw Mr. O'Byrne a dirty look. See what you do? He turned to the rest. I just wanted to say that when Jason and I were trying to mend a hole in space that threatened to kill us all, he high-fived Jason and continued, there was only a couple hundred bees. He looked around the room to gauge everyone's expression as the roar of a million bees raged outside. What can the mayor be doing that is so much worse than a hole in space? Scene change. Scene change. Scene change. Joseph Dixon had never been a perfect man. Like everyone who had ever loved life, Joseph Dixon was afraid to die. He was a rational man, and a man of science. He knew he would never be able to answer every question about the universe that he wanted to answer before he died, especially not when he realized the answers only led to more questions. He just couldn't fathom it, leaving the world without ever learning the point of living at all. At 24, he had already begun questioning the meaning for everything. Nothing made sense. Why were they clinging blindly to a rock hurtling through a vast expanse of nothing and pretending that the business they got up to on that rock meant anything at all? Even in 1908, he could see how pointless it all seemed to be. A dark time was coming for humanity. Joseph already knew exactly what he could expect from his life, and it had a certain banality he just wasn't interested in indulging. So he built a time machine. It didn't just come to him in a dream or anything like that even. Joseph had luck to thank for stumbling upon the first and most important ingredient to the whole puzzle. Had anyone else stumbled upon the rock, they likely would have sold it to a local pawn shop for a couple $100 blown away that night on liquor. A smarter man would have taken the rock to a jeweler, who would likely give it to a man who would likely give the man $10,000 for the most unique and rare material they had ever seen. It would be a rip-off, of course, as the jeweler would make millions turning that one rock into 100 beautiful trinkets and accessories. Eventually, the government would catch wind of the material and even more down the road learn how to unlock its true power, but that was not what happened. Joseph had seen the meteorite come down that night, and he knew no one else had. It was 3 in the morning, everything was quiet, the impact barely even made a sound. It had landed in a wooded path behind his townhouse. He found it there in a surprisingly small crater and immediately took note of its strange glow. The rock wasn't in the least bit reflective, and yet it seemed to shine with light. He took it back to his lab and ran experiments in secret. Coke break, do-do-do-do-do, Coke break. I just drank it all. Hope I don't need more. Coke break, do-do-do-do-do, Coke break. Alright. Oh, that's actually the next word too. Alright. It hadn't been his lab. He'd done an internship at Thomas Edison's laboratory in Orange County, and it had been there that he'd brought the rock. In secret, of course, from everyone, as his keycard access had actually been revoked after he'd finished his term. It was standard operating procedure, but he'd spent enough time there to know other ways in. The tests he ran on the rock were inconclusive at best, complete contradictions upon all the rules of physics at worst. What he got from bouncing different types of atoms off the hard surface were numbers far slower than seemed possible, and recalculating important physics equations with the new values provided results he could never have dreamed. What was even more exciting was how the rock reacted when bombarded with electrons. Within a matter of weeks he was ready to take a proposal to the board heads of the lab, and it was a good thing too, as security had begun sniffing him out. He brought to the table all the data he'd collected along with his plans to create a time machine. He didn't tell them his personal interest in the project, of course, or that he didn't plan to take them with him when he went into the future. Still, the men with the money were scientists, and it didn't take long before he had them eating from the palm of his hand. Never before had someone been able to suggest a viable form of time travel. Never before had the science community ever seen an element quite like the one Joseph had stumbled upon. Some had their doubts, and Joseph could still remember Thomas Edison's words the morning before the first and only test of Dixon's machine.
"You can't do this,"
Edison said, joining Joseph in the lab. They were the only 2 people there, as all 5 of Joseph's assistants had been sent home early. As far as they all knew, the test was still almost a week away. "Whether you think you can do something," Joseph quoted, "or you think that you can't, you're right." He'd patted his colleague on the back as he passed the older man to grab the rock from its secure place in a thick lead safe. Edison had followed him angrily.
"I really don't think Henry Ford was aiming to stroke your ego when he said that."
"He was right, though," Joseph told the man he'd once looked up to. "With nothing but a dream, I have been able to bend the universe to my will. I have made time travel an actual thing just by believing it so."
"And what place does God have?"
Thomas Edison had pleaded to the younger scientist.
"In a world shaped by your consciousness."
"What right does God have to stop me?" Joseph had asked. "Why do we die when humans in the future get to live forever?"
"We're not talking about immortality,"
Edison said, though he had been wrong. He just didn't know it yet. Joseph lifted the rock from the safe and raised it for Edison to see. "I found this rock," he told the man, "and with it I shall meet God. You say I'm being egotistical. I say I'm accepting an award far more prestigious than any Nobel Prize." He smiled. "If anything, I'm being humble just entertaining you right now."
"What are you even doing with that Dixonite?"
Edison had said, finally taking note of the bizarre situation he'd walked in on.
"The tests aren't till next week."
He had stepped back and looked around the lab.
Where's all your assistants?
he asked. That was when he noticed the movement of the centrifuge. Joseph could still remember the expression on the man's face, even after 30 years. To think that the centrifuge they'd built back then was only a couple meters wide, and yet it had seemed a wonder. He'd learned from their mistake last time. The one he had now, the one that was going to send him all the way to the inevitable future, was as tall and wide as a 10-story skyrise. And today, he would become the first human being to have traveled in time, not once, but twice. Scene change. Scene change. Scene change. Tanya had been parked over the best makeout spot in Oakville, the one overlooking the harbor. She wasn't making out there, but it was one of the few places she liked to go to hide and think, and she had a lot to think about. Only minutes after finding out the shyest girl in her school was a vampire, Tanya had lured her into the girls' bathroom and kissed her. Her life had been insane since, but she'd been going with it because, like it or not, Tanya was in love. Now she felt like she was living a lie with every passing day she wasn't Rachel's girlfriend. She'd always been the sort of girl to go after whatever she wanted, completely unconcerned about the consequences. This time just wasn't so easy. Did Tanya really have any right getting between the two biggest geeks at her high school? Ian liked Rachel as much as Tanya did, perhaps even more so. They'd been friends for far longer than Tanya had even ever known Rachel existed. What if Rachel didn't like girls like that? She never did seem to show much interest. The fact of the matter was that Tanya could question her windshield all day, but she'd never get an answer until she just manned up and asked Rachel. She knew Rachel had kissed back in that bathroom, just before Tanya had pulled that arrow from her shoulder. People were allowed to act irrationally in extreme situations. Tanya didn't know what to make of her feelings. She was conflicted and confused, and pretty much ready to drown herself in the putrid waters below when the swarm of bees hit. And sure, there was a quick hesitation as Tanya tried to process what was going on, but her thoughts eventually halted and were replaced with one clear objective: find Rachel Lin Smith. At first she tried calling the vampire's name. After all, couldn't that girl hear a mouse squeak from a mile away? Rachel Lin Smith? And then Tanya said the name quietly, and then again louder. Finally she screamed, "Rachel!" at the top of her lungs, but it didn't seem to be of any use. Also, she felt like an idiot screaming to herself in her van. The bees were everywhere, pattering against the hood and blocking all sight in any direction. The buzzing alone was thunderous to the point of making her deaf. Of course Rachel would never hear her over all that. Tanya quickly checked her phone, and wasn't much surprised to find herself with no reception. Didn't that always happen at the worst times? She supposed she could try to get closer to the cell tower. Better doing that than nothing at all. Turning the key in the ignition, she was relieved to find that the van started without any trouble. She put the vehicle into reverse and backed out of her parking spot. Though completely blind, Bronte Harbor was one of Tanya's favorite places, and she'd always known deep down she could navigate it blind. She just never expected to be put to the test. She started off slowly, turning the corner onto the small road that led out to the main street. She flicked on her high beams, which helped not at all, and continued to inch forward. Slow and steady would win the race this time. She glanced down at her phone. Still nothing. There was a strange bit of motion just out of view, and a loud crash that drowned out even the bee swarm for a moment. From what Tanya could gather, a car had almost hit her, and gone straight past into what she was going to guesstimate was the old Ma and Pa ice cream parlor. She kept going, completely ignoring how close she had just come to being that ice cream parlor, and as she came to a stop at what she hoped was the intersection, her cell phone beeped. 1 bar, enough to send Rachel a text, and hope the vampire had more bars. Tanya Dayton texting someone should be bolded. Tanya Dayton, I'm at Bronte Harbor. It was a quick text, but she hoped it would be enough. The message took a long time to send, but the familiar swoosh finally rang out, and Tanya leaned back in her chair. She turned on her Grateful Dead CD and closed her eyes for a moment while taking in Touch of Grey. Suddenly there was a tapping on her window, and Tanya jumped sky high. It was Rachel. That was fast. Tanya unlocked the passenger door as Rachel slipped instantaneously around. As soon as the teen vampire opened the door, the bees started to swarm inside. Tanya gave a girly shriek as a number came in on her. Ah! One tangling in her hair, Rachel got in quickly and closed the door behind her, but the damage had been done. There were a good 50 bees inside now, and Tanya angrily squashed one with her palm against the driver's side window. Rachel's hand suddenly began striking out faster than Tanya could even see, and within seconds all the bees were dead. Tanya could feel her jaw drop. "That was kinda hot," she said at last. Rachel grinned beneath her now messy black hair. "I know," she said. "You okay?" "Yeah," Tanya assured her. "You?" "Hungry?" Rachel admitted. She blushed beneath her locks. "It's been a crazy day," she said, "but I promise not to bite." Tanya wanted to say she wouldn't much mind if Rachel did bite, but memories of the last time she'd been bitten by a vampire reminded her why that wasn't true. Instead, Tanya changed the topic. "So, how far does this swarm go?" Rachel shook her head. "Haven't seen the end," she told Tanya. "Could be all the way from one side of Oakville to the other." She pulled her phone from her pocket and read a text message. "Andrew wants to video chat. Is there anywhere close with free Wi-Fi?" "There's a McDonald's somewhere over there," she said, pointing to her left while putting her van into drive. "Buckle up," she told Tanya. Rachel. Tanya told Rachel. "I'll get you anywhere you need to go." Driving blind was hard, but with Rachel's superior senses, the whole thing seemed almost doable. "I think the intersection is clear," Rachel said, peering into the swarm with a look of concentration on her face as Tanya inched the vehicle forward again. "You're just filling me with confidence," Tanya lied, looking both ways before crossing the intersection, though it did her little good. And how would she know if she'd driven far enough to turn into the McDonald's? She had to make the turn eventually. It was a miss, as she felt the wheels of her van go over a curb. She slightly hit something, the dull thud sounding much like the bark of a tree. Tanya was about to voice defeat, but Rachel smiled. "I've got it," she told Tanya. She hit a button and put her iPhone on the dashboard. "Rachel," Andrew said through the phone, his face showing up on its bright display. "What's the buzz on the street?" Tanya winced. "How long did it take you to come up with that terrible pun?" she asked. "Tanya!" Andrew said in surprise. Evidently she was out of frame. "Where were you when the swarm struck?" Bleh. Bleh. Could use more drink. It's too late. I'm doomed. "Tanya," Andrew said in surprise. Evidently she was out of frame. "Where were you when the swarm struck?" "In my van," Tanya told the phone. "Bronte Harbor," Rachel told everyone listening on the other end. Mike squeezed his way into frame. "Bronte Harbor," he repeated. "Don't they also call that Makeout Harbor?" he asked Andrew, who didn't seem to have a clue. Ian pushed them both aside. "We've come across some fairly radical theories that we're wanting to run by you," he told Rachel, holding a picture of a man up to the camera. "Do you recognize who this is?" he asked. Tanya stole a glance and couldn't help from snorting. Everyone turned their attention to her. She leaned into the frame and asked, You're kidding, right?" "We think he's a time traveler," Ian continued, and Tanya openly started to laugh. Ian frowned, but still kept going. "We think he came to our time from 1908, and he's looking to travel through time again." "That's ridiculous," Tanya said, straightening out of frame. "Vampires are ridiculous," Rachel told her with a funny look. Tanya didn't respond, but reached over and turned off the video chat. "What the hell, Tanya?" Rachel asked. What the hell indeed? Tanya was feeling sick. Her knuckles white and clammy wrapped around the steering wheel. Was she really going to tell someone else her secret? Last time she'd done that, it had gotten messy. This time threatened to be even more so. "There's no way the mayor of Oakville can be a time traveler from 1908, Tanya told Rachel. "I know it sounds crazy," Rachel said. "He's my dad," Tanya said. "Joseph Dixon is my dad." "What?" Rachel asked in surprise. Tanya took a deep breath and held it, waiting for Rachel to freak. "But your name," she said. "Isn't it Dayton?" Tanya shook her head. My real name is Shauna Dixon," she told Rachel, "though I've been going by Tanya Dayton since starting school." "Why?" Rachel asked, to Tanya's surprise. I didn't want to be treated any differently, Tanya said. She thought it was obvious. She thought Rachel especially would understand why someone might want to hide being special. I didn't want to be the center of attention all the time. You should have thought of that before running for president, Rachel said quietly, and Tanya blushed with embarrassment. The vampire had a point, of course, but once Tanya had realized that she could win, her pride just got the better of her. It wasn't her fault she was so damn popular. You must hate me, Tanya said. Rachel shook her head. I don't. I betrayed your trust, Tanya argued. I lied to you. Rachel shrugged. You lied to everyone, she rationalized. I'm really all right with it. Tanya breathed a sigh of relief. Please don't tell the others, she told Rachel, especially Andrew. My lips are sealed, Rachel said. But I can't believe you've been living in a lie all this time. She seemed to stare off for a moment, deep in thought. I just thought these last couple weeks the world has turned out to be so much more complicated than I ever expected. Tanya laughed. I know exactly how you feel. Then she frowned. My dad can't be a time traveler. She threw Rachel a worried look and asked, I mean, I would know, right? Scene change. Scene change. Scene change. Andrew's phone rang again, but this time it was Ian that answered. Andrew's phone, Ian said to the camera as Rachel's face showed up once more on the screen. You okay? Yeah, Rachel said. It's just been a crazy day. So, Tanya said, taking the phone from Rachel and peering through at Ian. How exactly does someone travel through time? She raised an eyebrow. Do you have a theory for that? Honestly, Ian said, I have no idea what's going on. He turned the camera around so the two girls could see O'Byrne at the whiteboard. But he might. Mr. O'Byrne's with you? Tanya asked with surprise. Hello, Tanya. Itchy eye. That's not what he said. That's why I said. Alright. Hello, Tanya, O'Byrne said into the phone. You don't look so sick. And you don't look so crazy, Tanya said through the phone. You can't honestly believe it's possible to travel through time. Well, we travel forward in time every day, O'Byrne argued. It couldn't be that hard to just speed it up. He stroked his chin. Yo, Gordon said, passing into view of the camera. You wouldn't need to manipulate time at all, just freeze it within a confined space like a bubble. Wait, Rachel's voice called out from Andrew's iPhone. What the hell is Gordon doing there? We needed the brains, Ian insisted, flipping the camera to face him. We didn't tell him about He suddenly noticed Gordon and Alice's eyes on him. His words stumbled. The bitey stuff? Ian, hey Ian, Tanya called through the phone. That was real subtle. Ian flipped the camera back towards O'Byrne and Gordon before he stepped up again. Gordon grabbed a marker and drew a circle on the board. I actually got this idea from Star Trek, he admitted to them. Of course, we all know what a warp bubble is. I don't, Tanya said through the phone, rolling her eyes. I'm not a dweeb. Well, Mr. O'Byrne said, stepping in, warp bubbles allow the ships in Star Trek to travel faster than light. The way it works is that the bubble travels at super high speeds, but everything inside the bubble is really standing still. Gordon drew a stick figure inside his circle. Keeps old bad side effects of traveling that fast from affecting the people inside, he told the group. Tanya's voice rang out from the phone, asking, why can't I scroll? Right, there we are. I lost it. I scrolled too far, I think. Man, how much? Man, I really lost it. Yo, Gordon said, passing into view of the camera. You won't need to manipulate time at all, just freeze it within a confined space, like a bubble. Wait, Rachel's voice called out from Andrew's phone. What the hell is Gordon doing there? We needed his brains, Ian insisted, flipping the camera to face him. We didn't tell him about He suddenly noticed Gordon and Alice's eyes on him, and his words stumbled. The bitey stuff? Hey, Ian, Tanya called through the phone. That was real subtle. Ian flipped the camera back towards O'Byrne and Gordon before he stepped up again. Gordon grabbed a marker and drew a circle on the board. I actually got this idea from Star Trek, he admitted to them. Of course, we all know what a warp bubble is. I don't, Tanya said through the phone, rolling her eyes. I'm not a dweeb. I think I read all this. I apologize, but oh well. Said Mr. O'Byrne, stepping in. Warp bubbles allow the ships in Star Trek to travel faster than light. The way it works is that the bubble travels at super high speeds, but everything inside the bubble is really standing still. Gordon drew a stick figure inside his circle. Keeps all the bad effects of traveling that fast from affecting the people inside, he told the group. Tiny's voice rang out from the phone, asking, So you think the mayor is using one of these warp bubbles to travel through time? Not really an intended use, Andrew muttered from his seat behind 3 computer monitors. If time isn't a dimension, though, O'Byrne argued, it really is just a measure of the forward motion of the galaxy. And there is no motion inside the bubble, Gordon said, coming to the teacher's conclusion. Damn, Burns. This dude ain't traveling through time at all, he's just freezing himself. O'Byrne took Gordon's marker and started writing out an equation. The length of time the bubble remained open would be completely proportional to the energy provided, the teacher explained. In 1908, I bet Dixon wasn't capable of getting enough energy to send him as far into the future as he wanted. So we're talking less Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure and more Demolition Man, right? Tanya asked through the phone. Oh, you've seen Demolition Man but not Star Trek? I like Sandra Bullock, Tanya said in her defense. You've explained almost everything, Rachel said, except where the swarm of bees came from. Well, Mr. O'Byrne said, scratching his chin and staring at Gordon's crude drawing, I suppose if time literally doesn't exist within the bubble, then it would be best that everything inside the bubble is outside of the universe itself and existing in just 2 places, here and sometime in the future. Taking into account what Jason and Mike told me of your encounter with a literal tear in space, I can surmise that the mind state of the bees probably incorrectly identified the bubble as a similar tear. So now you're talking crazy, Gordon complained. And yet, it happened in 1908, stated Jason. So we're just dealing with here. So what we're dealing with here isn't apocalyptic, Mike asked. Because if not, it's so beneath us. I'm not sure, the science teacher admitted. I don't even pretend to understand the workings of the universe. I'd give the chance of this machine causing major harm maybe 50-50. Aha, that's reassuring, Bilal called out from beside Alice. In 1908, Gordon started to recap, some punk-ass scientist named Dixon built a time machine and almost has his trip to the future ruined by a swarm of bees. When he tries again over 100 years later, he, builds a big box around it first? And the bees are all just like swarming around this one super fortified position. Mike tried to explain, finally understanding. This is trippy. All the guy wants to do is travel through time, and he inadvertently caused the worst natural disaster to ever hit Oakville. I'm still not convinced it's the mayor. Oh, my eyes. You haven't seen the evidence we found, Ian told them, still holding the phone away from himself. Either it's the same guy from 1908, or our mayor is Clayface, he said, referring to the Batman villain, who could shapeshift. Well, they could always just go ask him, Andrew suggested. I'd love to have some words with that guy, Tanya said with a surprising amount of venom in her voice. Well, that can be arranged, Andrew said. I have a theory on pinpointing his location. I just need to find a top-down view of Oakville. He began typing furiously at his computer. I get it, Gordon said, joining Andrew at his computers. He'll be at the very center of the swarm, right? Exactly. Well, move aside, Grezzy, Gordon said, pushing Andrew's chair. Google Earth won't be reason enough. You're going to need a live satellite feed. Ian followed Gordon with the phone, and Tanya caught sight of Alice sitting in the corner. Hey, Tanya said abruptly, what's Alice doing here? Andrew looked up from his screen. She was mind controlled by Eckhart, so we're keeping an eye on her, he recapped quickly. Tanya didn't take the news well. When the hell did that happen, and why didn't anyone tell me? Tanya called out through the phone. Alice, honey, are you alright? Aha, she can't talk, Bilal said from beside the red-headed girl, or really make any sound at all. Can't she text? Tanya asked bitterly. Alice's eyes lit up and her phone was instantly in her hand. So when the hell did she come into contact with Eckhart? Tanya asked. First period, Rachel said so quietly that Ian almost didn't hear her through the phone. Wait, Tanya said. You knew? Ian handed Andrew his phone back. That could get messy, he said with a grimace. I'm running to take a piss. Grab me a Coke from the cafeteria on your way, Andrew yelled after him. Ian didn't get far before turning a corner and bumping directly into Eckhart's large frame. He was leaning lightly on a cane, a big smile spreading across his lips. Ian's heart stopped in fright, and he backed away slowly. Come with me. Nope, wrong guy's voice. Eckhart is, come with me. Slightly different. Eckhart said, their eyes meeting for just a moment. It was enough. All right, Ian said. Sounded like a good idea to him. Of course, he still had to pee, but that would no longer be a problem as he let it flow down his leg before following after the serial killer vampire. Scene change. Scene change. Scene change. Alright, I think I'm halfway through this chapter, and I'm going to stop here because I'm getting tired and my eyes are hurting, so I need to go wash them or something, splash my face, make me feel better. So anyway, that was the first half of chapter 12. I hope you enjoyed. I will be finishing it as soon as possible. I've been sort of recording some of these back to back just because the new chapter for the month is going to take place in the urban fantasy universe. But anyway, exhaustion is embracing me, so I'm going to have to go fight it off a different way. Until next time, we are the 99% Geek.